Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Photolisting and Inquiry Response Systems webinar. We will be starting shortly. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Practice 101 Photolisting and Inquiry Response System webinar. My name is Lihia Cushman, and I am a National Child Welfare Consultant with Adopt US Kids. And I am going to be joined by Alicia Groh, who is also a National Consultant with Adopt US Kids. And we have some guest speakers from South Carolina and Michigan, which I will introduce later. Next slide. So just a couple of housekeeping pieces before we get started. This webinar will be recorded and shared on our Adopt US Kids site. So if you miss anything or you feel like you wanna be able to share this in the future, don't worry, it will be on there. Everyone will be muted, so please feel free to submit your questions via the chat or the Q&A tab. And we will have some time at the end for some questions and answers. And so feel free to put them in the Q&A and we will be looking at them periodically throughout the webinar. And then please, just so you know, at the end of this webinar, you will be receiving a survey that we would love for you to fill out. It'll just help us figure out what we can improve on, what went well, and then also give us ideas on future presentations you'd like us to do in the future. Next slide. Many of you already know that we are a federally funded project through the Children's Bureau at the Department of Human and Services. We also have a two-pronged mission here at Adopt US Kids. The first is that we really want to raise public awareness about the need for foster and adoptive families for the children that we're serving in our child welfare systems. But we also help and assist states, territories, and tribes to recruit, engage, and develop with trainings and support for adoptive families. And this webinar is part of part of our second prong. It's part of the work that we do, particularly in our capacity building team. And so we're really excited to have you be a part of this, and hopefully you'll join in the chat with us as well. Next slide. So I'd like you all to just take a few minutes. I've introduced myself, but I'd love to hear, and a lot of you, 62 of you have already been active in the chat. I'd love for you to take some time to introduce yourself to the group, the virtual group. And then for those of you who haven't, I have a little polling question that I'd like for you to take some time to answer. And that's, what do you hope, what's the one thing you hope to take away from this presentation today? What are you hoping to learn? What kind of tips are you hoping to gain from this webinar? And that will help us as well, make sure that we're touching all the points that you're really interested in making sure that we hit today. And let's see, I'm gonna try this. Let's see if anybody's, so we have some recruitment folks on here, lots of adoption staff. I've seen some familiar faces already from Florida and North Carolina. Lots of folks from South Carolina as well. Wonderful. Wow, we've got Tennessee in here. Amazing, love it. Keep adding to your chat, to the chat, and Alicia and I will be looking at it periodically throughout the webinar. Next slide. So I'd like to take some time to just go over our agenda for the day. Today, we're really gonna spend some time talking about strength-based narratives. We're also going to talk about strategies to manage child-specific inquiries. I'm really excited about the connection between effective systems and photolistings, which Alicia will talk a little bit about later on in the presentation. And I'm most excited for number 4, which is our peer sharing segment, where we're going to have South Carolina and Michigan share some really great tips and strategies and even tools that they've developed to help them in their state to do child-specific inquiries in a new and innovative way. Next slide. And of course, we'll have time for Q&A at the end, as I mentioned. So today I'm gonna take some parts to just chat with you about strength-based narratives and what that looks like in our field and how things are changing. Next slide. So in the slides to come, you're gonna hear me break down the difference between public versus private sharing of information on children, but in particular, the do's and don'ts. We'll talk a little bit about the continuum of disclosure and what does that look like, private versus public. And then we're also gonna take some time to discuss and share about strength-based narratives and how they compare and connect to our response systems. Next slide. So continuum of disclosure. When we're talking about public disclosure of information for children, we're really, the people that are really coming through the door, that this is for families who are interested in adoption, but it's like general. They have not made a full commitment to become an adoptive parent. They have not been home studied. They have not had any real formal training, or really probably haven't even talked to anyone about this process. And so that's why we here at Adopt US Kids, we believe that sharing public information on children, that initial interaction should be minimal. It should be information about the child in regards to what they like to do, their personality, maybe some quotes from the child. But we don't typically in a public narrative get into the weeds of their needs, their challenges, why they came into care. Those we save for a later time. So public is really about focusing on, you know, how do you share a child's story about who they are in a strengths-based way that will engage prospective or inquiring families to want to learn more about that child. When we're talking about private perspectives, this is more about families who have already been trained, have been home studied, And they're now trying to figure out what is the best fit for us as a family? What child could our strengths meet their needs? And so they're still in the inquiring phase in regards to trying to really narrow down what child they're looking for and what they can meet for a child. And so when you're looking at private, that is where you're meeting one-on-one with the family and you're sharing a little bit more about what the child needs, about the struggles that the child is experiencing. But again, this is not where we're sharing all the information about a child, their developmental needs, their issues with learning. This is more where we're talking a little bit more about who this child is as a person and letting the family know for this child to be successful in your home, they're going to need X, Y, and Z. And then confidentiality. This is for prospective adopters, right? They've gone through the match process and they're moving now towards placement. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we take the time to really break down the child's social history, how they came into care, what are their needs, what medical providers do they have, how are they doing in school, what school are they going to? That's where at that point is where we're sharing more of the information about what it would take day to day to have this child live in their home and thrive. Next slide. So what to include in a public profile? You want to always use the child's preferred name. Definitely want to use a recent photo, if at all possible. Our smartphones take great photos, but as you all know, those of you who are in the field of adoption, it's really helpful to have professional shots whenever possible taken of children. And usually for me, when I was a recruiter, that was the thing that helped me the most, was to take kids out to the park and just make sure that they're having a great time and smiling, and not typically the first photo that we've shared or that we've taken of that child when they just entered care. So just, a recent, fresh, current photo. Make sure that you're listing positive personality traits. They're smart, they're athletic, they're happy. They love to, things like what they love to do, right? So that would fall under their strengths. They love to read, they love to run, they're on such and such team. What interests and hobbies do they have? Do they like school? Not even do they like school, but what do they like about school? Making sure that, I remember asking kiddos, what is their favorite subject? And that would always lead to a little bit more information about what they liked about school and where prospective families could really engage the child in a conversation. What makes them laugh, right? Are these kiddos funny? Do they have jokes that they would like to share with a prospective family? And then always asking children, what are the things that are important to them? I think oftentimes as recruiters, we can get busy in the making sure that we're getting everything right and doing all the work right, that sometimes we don't necessarily engage youth in a manner that helps them be a part of this journey, right? Be a part of recruitment efforts and be a part of their adoption journey. Next slide. So here's a general list of some things that we really try to stay away from and not include in a public profile. For one, just identifying information. We don't put a child's social security number. We definitely don't put their date of birth, what school they're attending specifically, who their therapist is. Those are things that we really need to keep off of a public profile. Remember, usually the folks looking at public profiles have not even really started the adoption process. They're more inquiring and trying to figure out what they're looking for and if they're really committed to this process. So we want to keep the information as private as we can. We definitely don't want to share about their abuse and neglect and maltreatment history, how many placements they've had. I think we've all seen those public profiles that say this child, little Johnny's been in 25 placements. That definitely scares a family. And we know that we have lots of kiddos that have been in placements, 25, 30, some 50 placements. We know that, but it's not something that we necessarily need to share in a public profile. We don't share medical information, behavior challenges, potentially painful or embarrassing information, fears, anxieties. Those are things that, again, we share with a family that's been matched and is really interested in moving forward with placement. Again, things that limit potential families, intellectual ability or education challenges. We don't list, whether the child has been diagnosed with ADHD. We try to stay away from, this child has an IEP, a 504 plan, some kind of additional educational support. We really try to gauge how are we sharing information and what is absolutely necessary to share right now. And then finally, sexual orientation and or gender identity. I think for a public profile, a child's photo and a little bit of information about them is enough for that initial contact, that initial public profile. I think that, sexual orientation, gender identity, we all know it's extremely complex. We know that we need to let, especially young people, tell us who they are and who they believe that they are. And so, being respectful and mindful of their pronouns, those are things that we share later on. I think that as we are looking for families for kiddos that we've taken the time to get to know and we know well, we will know which families are open and interested in adopting all children or any kind of child that it may be struggling or may be experiencing identity issues or have already decided, this is how I would like the world to see me. And so being respectful of that, being mindful of that, and remembering that that doesn't have to be something that is shared in the initial public profile. Next slide. And so we're gonna spend a little bit of time talking about child-specific inquiries. As I mentioned earlier, we have the state of South Carolina and Michigan here. And they're definitely gonna give you some tips and some tools that they've used that have been really successful for them. But before we do that, I wanted to just take a little bit of time to provide some initial tips and strategies on child-specific inquiries. Next slide. So just remembering when we're doing child-specific inquiries, a big part of inquiries or child-specific inquiries or even receiving them is how do we draft that strength-based narrative? So always being open and having open feedback loops with your supervisor, with your team and your peers, having folks double check and look at your narrative and what is it really saying? I think with a strong photo and a good narrative, it can yield really great results for the children that we're serving. And so feedback loops are really, really important in that journey. In addition, I think that start building relationships with those families who inquire. I think that is, we've all had those calls, right? Of families who are interested, maybe they've been home studied, maybe they haven't, but it becomes overwhelming for us as case management or social workers to respond to a huge number of inquiring families. But I think that I've always been of the belief that that initial contact with that family, they may not be the perfect match for the child that we're looking for, right? But they may be a really great fit for another child that we may be looking for a family for. And so when you start building that relationship, when you start building trust, when you start responding to their emails and their phone calls within reason, of course, building that relationship is how you also get to assess and get to know that family as well and see where would they be a good fit for a child. And then when families first inquire, I think, I've seen this throughout my career. We've had to take time to kind of figure out, okay, so how are we offering families who have sent us an email about little Johnny or Susie, how are we really connecting with them and making sure that they're getting clear next steps? I think that emails are a really great way to do that. I've seen a lot of folks have these generic emails that say, thank you so much for contacting us. And here, if you're interested in learning more, here's the person to contact, or here's the unit, here's the phone number. I think giving families real clear instruction will help with the volume of contact that we have with families, because we know that you're busy going to court, you're busy doing home visits and making sure that kids are thriving in school and medical appointments. So ensuring that you have someone that's providing that information to families that are inquiring, I have found it to be super helpful. And then be proactive, right? This work for child, in talking specifically about child-specific inquiries, it's really intentional work, right? How do we connect with families? How do we learn about the child? Just make sure that, you know, you're being proactive about this process. You're being proactive in communicating with families well in advance to let them know, you know, we want to move forward with you, or you need to go get home studied, or you need to go through this training. Just being proactive and staying in contact with those that you know are going to be a good fit. But then also, how do we coach and talk to families who are inquiring about a child, but you, in your initial conversations with them, are kind of realizing, and after reading their home study, maybe they're not a great fit for this child. Be proactive in having that conversation with them, giving them that feedback and letting them know there are other children that you may be a better fit for, and walk that walk with them whenever possible. Next slide. And now I'm going to pass it on to Alicia, who's going to talk a little bit more about response systems.
Great. Thanks so much, Lihia. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So I want to build on what Lihia has already started talking about with these child-specific inquiries. And the tips that she laid out really, I think, are great ways to think about kind of as an individual worker, how can you think about doing that response to child-specific inquiries? And we want to take it to a little bit deeper or broader level and think about really having a response system for responding to those inquiries from photolistings or other child-specific inquiries. And at Adopt US Kids, we talk a lot about the importance of response systems. And often when we use that term, we're referring to that response system to the first phone call or email from someone who says, I'm thinking about becoming a foster parent or an adoptive parent or a resource parent, sort of early in that process. But for this, we want to think about it as that response system for those child-specific inquiries. So someone who has seen one of your children or youth who's photolisted and is reaching out about that specific young person. But equally important here for this kind of response system is really to think about it as a system. It's what you have in place as expectations and processes or protocols for staff to use so that you all know what you're supposed to do to respond to those inquiries. So we're taking it from that kind of individual responsibility of, this is how I, Alicia, respond when I get one of those emails, to thinking about what does your agency or your child welfare system set up as really the system that will be used. And a lot of places, it's not spelled out as an intentional system, but that in that sense, the system it's whatever each individual person decides to do. So we really encourage you to think about it as, how can we make this an intentional piece of our work and make it about, here's how we across our team will respond to those kind of child-specific inquiries. So let's move on to the next slide. So I want to highlight a little bit more the value of having an effective response system for those child-specific inquiries, because it might sound like we're saying, here, set up a lot of new protocols and procedures. And this doesn't have to be a heavy lift to think about it as a response system. But we also want to highlight that there are really these benefits. So one of the key things that this does is it really, it provides support and it kind of reinforces your effort to keep families engaged. I think we hear all around the country that people are, trying to find more families and bring more families in to be adoptive parents for children who are waiting to be adopted. And one of the keys there is to really think about, once they have that initial contact with us, or once they've reached out to us expressing an interest in a specific child, we need to think about how we keep them engaged, how we keep building that relationship, as Lihia talked about, and really letting them know that we value them. Again, even if they may not be the right match for the specific child or youth that they're inquiring about, we want to convey that clear message that we really value them and we want to help explore other children who might be, where there might be a good match, where the family could be a good resource for that child. So an effective response system helps kind of reinforce and maximize the effort of your recruitment and your process for bringing prospective adoptive parents in. Having this kind of intentional, effective response system also really helps those families keep learning more about who the children are, that they are expressing interest in and who might be a good match for them. As Lihia talked about that continuum of disclosure, we really believe strongly at Adopt US Kids that we need to think carefully and thoughtfully about what information we share about children at each step of the process. For example, in the public profiles and private profiles, or later in more in-depth matching conversations. And so we want to balance this where we're saying, you know, we want families to understand that we're partnering with them to protect a child's safety and privacy and dignity. So it's not that we're withholding information, but that we're having this intentional continuum that we go through of when we disclose certain information. So that can help families become partners with us in understanding, okay, there may not be everything I want to know in that initial narrative or profile, but they can learn a little bit more as they get deeper into this process. And in responding to families and with those inquiries, we can also explain to them, here's what to expect. Here's when, you know, if you move forward in this in terms of being a possible match for this child, here's when you can get additional information. And here's when we'll be talking to you about that information that is not fit for putting in a public profile, but that would be really appropriate for having in conversations with a family about whether they would be a good match. And so I think this approach really helps families think about how to self-assess and keep thinking, would we be a good match for this child, but also to understand why is some information available now and why might we need to wait a bit longer, even though they're probably eager for all of the information. It helps them understand our reasoning for having that thoughtful flow of information. Let's go to the next slide. So we've talked a little bit about the value of this effective response system and some tips for doing it, but we want to get a little more specific. So let's dive into what an effective response system for these kind of child-specific inquiries looks like. What are those characteristics? Next slide. So as we think about effective photolisting response systems or response systems for other child-specific inquiries, there's several characteristics or qualities that we've identified in our work at a national level and also working with several child welfare systems. And so I'll run through these and give a little bit of example of what this could look like in practice. I do also want to note here that as we're talking about these child-specific inquiries, one thing, and Lihia mentioned this a bit, but we wanted to help you distinguish between those inquiries that might be from someone who is not yet home studied, has not started the process, but saw a public profile, you know, on a website, on a photo listing or somewhere else, and they call, and you've probably all gotten that call of, Sarah looks like she should be our child. You know, we want to bring her home next week. How do we make Sarah our child? But the family has not yet started any of the process, has not started any trainings, has not been home studied. You likely need to have a different kind of protocol in place and talking points in place for responding to those kind of child-specific inquiries where the family is not going to be in the position to move ahead, you know, right away in terms of being a possible match for the child about whom they're inquiring. But again, having an intentional way, having a process in place, having talking points for staff to use can be really helpful there. So you're not just being dismissive, you're still engaging and building that relationship, but you're letting the family know, okay, well, here are the steps you'll need to go through before you could be considered as an adoptive resource. And one of the things we've found helpful at Adopt US Kids is to explain to families, and because we want to make sure, we're hoping that Sarah will have a permanent loving family soon, you know, she may not still be waiting. We hope she's not still waiting to be adopted by the time you make it through that process. But that's what we should all be rooting for Sarah, is that we find her a family before then. So you can think about that kind of messaging where you can sort of redirect families to where they need to be in terms of starting the process, but still be encouraging and helping them understand why we're still moving ahead with trying to find another family for Sarah. So it's a really good way to build that partnership and again, help families deepen their understanding of both the process, but also how to really keep the child's needs at the center of the consideration. So I just wanted to flag that for the tips we're highlighting here, it's really thinking about for those families who are inquiring about a specific child, when those families are home studied or approved or licensed, whatever the requirement is in your system, and thinking about, okay, this is how we'll respond to them, moving them through. But we recognize that there are families who fall into another category. So for these effective response system qualities, the first one here is that they are responsive and timely, and that can look like a lot of different things. But one of the key pieces here is actually having a response in a prompt way so that when you're getting those inquiries, even if it's something that's maybe automated, as Lihia mentioned, or is maybe a shorter response initially, like thank you for your interest in, whoever the child was or the sibling group was, and indicating something like, we will follow up with you within this amount of time. Having some response really is a way to show that you are you're valuing them, you're welcoming them and appreciating their inquiry, even if we can't engage with the family immediately to talk more with them about their inquiry. But having that kind of responsiveness and that timeliness within, a day or two, or whatever your parameters are that you set forth for your response system, it does show that we value families expressing this interest, and that we are welcoming them, and that we want to be respectful of their sense of interest and wanting to move forward. So we know that's challenging with everything that people have on their plates to do that in a timely way, but this is where having it written out as a response system and an expectation that we will respond to all inquiries within a certain number of days, that makes that clear and helps with prioritization across other parts of your workload. Another key characteristic here is that these response systems that are effective are really accessible and engaging. And so the accessible can look like a lot of different things. It can mean that there are multiple ways that families could submit an inquiry, such as by phone or through the website or by email or through an online photo listing system. So there are sort of multiple options for how to access to get into the system and to submit that inquiry, but also that they're really engaging. And again, this goes to the idea of being welcoming and showing that we value prospective families coming forward. We need to think about that this is a valuable resource to this child, potentially. This may be their adoptive family, and we want to engage the family and help them consider this. And again, to the point that Lihia covered earlier, even if this family isn't a match for this child, we still want to keep them engaged in considering being an adoptive family for other children who are waiting. And so by engaging them and not just making it a yes or no about a match for this child, we can really help keep them active and considering other possible matches. Effective response systems are also really supportive. And sometimes that can sound confusing to think about a response system that might sound more sort of technical. But this is where, again, we can keep building this relationship. We can be supportive in terms of understanding questions and eagerness that prospective parents may have. Again, they might have questions or confusion about why isn't there more information about this child in the profile, or when can I learn more? And I think it's helpful for us to approach that in a way that we're supporting them in both sort of honoring their desire for more information and helping them understand why we have this intentional way of sharing some information that's more public and then keeping other information more private in order to protect a child's safety and privacy and dignity. So we can really support them in being that partner with us. These response systems are also data-driven, and this is another one that I know can sound a little strange, but one of the things that can be really helpful for infusing data here is for you all to keep track of what works well in our response system. For example, do we see that if we respond to inquiries within a certain number of days or fewer, that we keep more families engaged, or that the families are better able to partner with us? Or are there other factors that you're able to track that tell you, that your data can tell you, here's how we can keep making this more effective? You can also be data-driven in sharing data with families. So for example, if you have data on things like, the average length of time from when we get an initial inquiry from families to when there might be a conversation or a meeting about, is this really a good match? That it can range from this number of weeks to that number of weeks, or whatever your time frame is. But you can be more specific if you have that data. Be really valuable to help set expectations for those prospective parents, and let them know that it isn't just Alicia saying, well, it won't take that long, or it'll take a while, because I might have a different sense of time than others. So really bringing in the data wherever you have that, it can help make your response system have clear messaging and help set expectations. And on that point of messaging, another key characteristic here is that effective response systems are consistent in their messaging. And we mean that both across staff, so that if you call Alicia or you submit an inquiry and it comes to me, or you submit an inquiry and it goes to Lihia, that you're going to get the same kind of information back. You're not going to get contradictory information back, certainly. We might have a different style and tone, certainly, in how we respond, but that we will have the same overall approach in terms of being welcoming and encouraging and letting you know what the next steps are. So there's that consistency regardless of which individual worker might respond. It's also consistency across parts of the process. So at that inquiry stage, you don't want to have it that I'm giving information to a family that contradicts what they heard in their pre-service training or what they may hear in their next conversation with the child's worker. So thinking about how do we have that consistency in messaging so that families are hearing the same message and the same kind of information, and we're not creating additional confusion by contradicting other parts of the messaging throughout the process. And then again, these effective response systems really do align with that goal of having a continuum of disclosure, of thinking about what is the appropriate information to share at what time and with which audience or with which prospective parents. So thinking about that in terms of, okay, if we're only giving certain information to prospective parents at this stage when they inquire, let's be clear about what that is and what information to share, and not suddenly start sending out a lot more information than what we plan to share at this point. Let's go to the next slide. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Lihia to get us into our peer speakers.
Really excited to introduce you all to Brittany Brewer from the state of South Carolina, where she works at the Department of Social Services at the State Office of Adoptions. Brittany?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to be speaking with you guys about the centralized recruitment program at specifically at DSS at South Carolina within our state office. Next slide. So our office in our state is split into 4 regions, and it's important just for you to see how our state is laid out so you can see how DSS operates. So each region has its own adoption office and an adoption administrator who's responsible for the region. And so the region holds case ownership, and the central office and state office is simply for program oversight, policy management, and for programs such as centralized recruitment that we've started at the adoption office. Next slide. The program was developed because there was a big breakdown between inquiries, following up with communication from the caseworker and the child. You know, caseworkers have a lot going on, and there were just hundreds and thousands of inquiries coming in. And prior to this program being implemented, all the inquiries on an available child were sent directly to the caseworkers. Caseworkers are overwhelmed with case management to respond and review all the inquiries. So a lot of potential matches for children were falling through the cracks. And so centralized recruitment was born at state office. Next slide. So our program launched November of 2019, almost 2 years ago. We've had over 3,000 inquiries from approved adoptive families since launch. Of the 3,000 inquiries we reviewed, we were able to identify 274 potential matches for the worker to consider. Most of these families may have fallen through the cracks before, because it's a lot to keep up with. SCDSS receives inquiries for available children via 3 sources, from our internal database, DSS, from Adopt US Kids, and from the South Carolina Heart Gallery. Next slide. So how does it work? All inquiries from these 3 sources previously mentioned are directed to one program coordinator in state office adoptions. So that means that one program coordinator I referenced earlier has responded to every single one of the 3,000 inquiries in the past almost 2 years. Each inquiry is responded to, acknowledging that we've received their inquiry within 3 business days. We found how important it is for families, for them to feel acknowledged and just to know that you've received the inquiry and you're working on it. Keeps the family engaged in the process, and more likely they'll inquire on other children if they know they're not a match for this child. Out-of-state families, they're reviewed, handled, and responded to the exact same way as in-state families. And if a family is not an approved adoptive home, we have an automatic system, an automatic reply set up through IT at our company. So if they inquire, a response will automatically go out to tell them how they can get approved so that they're not also, waiting out there. Next slide. In order to keep track of every inquiry, we developed an internal database on SharePoint where all families have an electronic file. And this includes in-state and out-of-state families. All their documents are stored in the system. For example, home studies, child factor checklists, foster home licenses, letters, summaries, pictures, everything. So we save it all. We also specifically ask for the family's caseworkers information. So we have their contact there for the future. If we need it, we can immediately go in and get it and not bog down the system later with getting it. And we get a lot of repeat families. So we just keep adding their inquiries to their file for future review. And their e-list, their e-file has every possible information that you want from the family. And it also tracks and dates all of our responses to make sure that we're sticking to our timeframes, which is very important. And having the system too, it really helps us pull reports and data easily when people ask for it. Next slide. Since we're a small program and we have big responsibilities, we have to think of ways to save time. So we have a Word document that has like a large script with email draft responses in it. For example, we have an email that goes out acknowledging your inquiry, an email that goes out requesting documents, etc. It just really helps time management. It was something that was suggested at the beginning, and thank goodness we did it. It's been very helpful. Next slide. Another thing that we've done is we've revamped our child factor checklist. I know a lot of, if not, everyone has one. Ours was revamped, and we request all inquiring families to complete this. And we also request that our caseworkers fill it out for our children on active recruitment so that we can learn more about the children and have a detailed background so we can better match. We implemented this new system to create more efficiency, because efficiency requires information. If our goal is to improve communication to families and increase the number of potential families shared directly to caseworkers, we needed adequate information on what the child's needs are and what the families can provide back. Next slide. So the child factor checklist is an 11-page document. It is very long and tedious, but it has helped us so much cut down on time. This document is filled out by the prospective adoptive family and the caseworkers. The family's version varies slightly from the staff version, but it captures the same information. The family is able to identify which diagnoses, behaviors, preferences they feel they could adequately parent in a child. And on the staff version, caseworkers complete it, so our centralized recruitment office has more information on the child, because since we're not the direct caseworkers of the child and we're reviewing these potential matches, we need as much accurate information as possible for the child. Next slide. So we request all inquiring families to complete this. It's part of the packet for all of our in-state families, but we send this to out-of-state families immediately. And having each family complete this, it really takes away the going back and forth, and it just saves a lot of time in the end. It's a lot of time to have to do it in the beginning, but in the end, we found that we're really saving a lot of time. The child factor checklist encompasses the following disabilities: developmental, physical, mental, emotional health, learning, behavioral, including sexual, substance abuse, juvenile court history, and family history. Next slide. When the caseworker is sent the child factor checklist to complete, they have 3 business days to send it back to our office. And it's really crucial that we stick with our time frame so that we can more efficiently serve the families that we're working with. Next slide. And once we have all the needed documents for review, what comes next? We review the inquiries, and then we send them to placement committee if a match is identified. Next slide. After all documents are received by our office, there's a 2-week time frame for our office to review the inquiry for a potential match. And the family is notified that there's a 2 weeks. So they will knock down your door on the 14th day if they haven't heard from you. The 2-week time frame starts once our office receives all documents from the prospective adoptive parents or their caseworker. Communication is key to keeping families stay engaged and helping them to feel valued through this process. Next slide. When a family is identified as a potential match by our office, they're sent to what we call placement committee. The region has a 30 calendar day deadline to hold a placement committee meeting and inform our office of the outcome. At the end of the 30 days, the caseworker informs our office notifies the family if they're not a match. If they are a match, then the caseworker reaches directly out to the family so that they can plan next steps. And that's kind of the end of our involvement in the process. Next slide. When we started this process, we launched it with an Excel sheet and no true database to hold all this information and to track every single inquiry. The more inquiries that rolled in, the more it became apparent that we really needed an internal database to hold all this information. So once we rough drafted what we wanted, IT developed the program overnight, and we really realized how quickly this could have been done from the beginning. But having an internal database is so key. And right now we have one staff member tracking all the inquiries, following up with caseworkers, parents, reviewing the inquiries, keeping up with placement committees, sending out reminders. So it's a lot for one person. And I definitely suggest having more staff, and I know funding is always an issue. And sometimes you need to prove yourself before you can get more staff. But I do suggest more staff. We're working with IT now to try and implement a better matching system with this new database. Our vision is to have all of our approved adoptive families, only the in-state ones at this time, upload their entire child factor checklist to this program, and we'll be able to search through families, sort through factors, and do a matching system and find families for these children. In order to do this, we'll have to definitely keep the child factor checklist updated annually and hire additional staff. Next slide. Streamlining this process has definitely been the support that both staff and families have needed. Workers, while they have tremendous responsibility, they no longer have to shoulder the burden of sifting through hundreds of inquiries. Instead, they can spend this time engaging and connecting with their youth. And a family no longer wonders if their inquiry landed in a worker's lap, if it was never received, or if it was looked over. I mean, they have a response immediately from us. Countless parents have thanked us for simple communication. We've received countless praise, positive feedback from adopted parents over the last almost 2 years. Information is power, and now families, they feel more informed, and they're definitely far less frustrated, which is wonderful to see, to work with, and to have all around. And ultimately, the true benefit is that we have improved our system and process in a way that prioritizes our kids and their permanency.
Thank you so much, Brittany, for that. Michelle Para is from Michigan, and we are super excited to have her share some tools and tips on the work that they've done in Michigan as well. Michelle?
Hi. Well, I'm happy to be here to share what we're doing in Michigan. I'll give you a little bit of a background about how our system is set up. So Michigan is, we're a pretty large state. We have a lower peninsula and upper peninsula. And all of adoptions in Michigan are privatized. So there is, the state has the control of the adoption case, and there are nonprofit agencies throughout the state that are the case workers for the youth and the family. So any child in Michigan who has a goal of adoption, any family who is interested in adopting through the child welfare system need to work with one of the private agencies in Michigan. And then there's us. So where I work with the Michigan Adoption Resource Exchange, or we're one of the 2 mayors in the United States. So we're one of the mayors. And our program is a contract with the state of Michigan, and we serve the entire state. So we're in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We have a staff of, we just added on a little bit. We have a staff of 24, and I'm the program manager of the program. And we recruit for, right, I checked today, we have 240 youth in Michigan. They have a goal of adoption and do not have an identified family to adopt them. So those are the youth that we're recruiting for. So I'll talk to you about what we do when we're getting ready to recruit for one of those youth. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'll talk about who's involved and what the roles are. So the adoption worker that, like I'd mentioned, who's working with another agency in Michigan, and the youth are like, that's where it starts with. So a couple of forms that I'm going to share that can be shared in the chat are forms that we ask adoption workers to submit to us when we are getting ready to photo list a youth or when they're registering a youth. So adoption policy in Michigan states that when a youth, when the court changes the goal from reunification to adoption, that adoption worker has 60 days to submit. It's all online, all digital, and they log password protected portion of our website. The adoption worker submits the information, like the name and case number of the youth, the information that they want us to include in the narrative, and then these forms where we ask the child, where the adoption worker will ask the child, what do you want others to know about you? And so that's a form that would be helpful to share, as well as any teacher or therapist or residential worker or foster parent. We ask them to complete this form, what others say about me. I think those are the titles of the form. So we get some really good information off those forms to write the narratives. We have our communication specialist that works with our program, who is not a social worker, who came to us, is a writer by profession and now is working with us. And what he does is he takes all the information that the worker provides us, goes through it. And a lot of times we don't get enough strength-based information. So he'll contact the adoption worker and ask, can we have another conversation with the youth? Or can you give us, what are some more interests that the youth have? Because sometimes workers don't know about writing the narrative, and because we're writing them, we go back to them and ask for the information that we need. All of our narratives are public. So even our narratives, we photo list all of our youth also on Adopt Us Kids, and we use only the public part of that website as well. So we keep everything very strength-based, only confidential information, first names only, all that. And then our expectation is that when a family sees a youth and inquires about the youth, that the next step is for the child's adoption worker to contact the family's adoption worker. And so these are for approved families in and out of the state of Michigan. The in-state families that we do in-state inquiries a little bit different than out-of-state families. The in-state families inquire through our website, through the mayor website, and they give us their information. So the child's worker can see on their dashboard on our website who all has inquired. And if that family has a Michigan adoption worker, then it's really easy to follow up with that Michigan adoption worker. The expectation is for the child's worker to contact and gather information from all the families that inquire within that first, our adoption policy says first 21 days from the first inquiry. So they collect all the home studies of those approved families, and then also they'll contact the adoption workers of out-of-state families who inquire through Adopt Us Kids and gather their home studies and they review them. And then they will choose, according to policy, choose the best family out of all those, or the family that's, they think will be the best. And then proceed to give a little bit more information to that family's adoption worker to see if it, truly could be a potential match. Because families don't know when they're just inquiring about a youth based on the, the very strength-based narrative. We'll share a little bit more to see if the family still wants to move forward. And then one point I missed with our writing the narrative is that our communication specialist writes the narrative, but before any of our narratives are posted on the internet, so on Adopt Us Kids or Mayor, there's always a second set of eyes on it. And in our most cases, it's that staff supervisor that reads it. Most of the time they're fine, but if there's anything questionable, that there's two people who look at that narrative before it's posted. So we can go to the next slide, please. So we do get, receive inquiries from both studied and unstudied families. But the child's worker, and this is, I keep saying, our policy, because there's these like best practice, and then there's policy, and a lot of workers, and I'm sure this is in other states, like they really follow policy. So they have to respond to all of the inquiries that are from families who already have an approved adoption home study or adoption assessment. Adoption workers will utilize, and I'll go into this in the next slide, but not yet, our stages of our photolisting stages, registration statuses. When the adoption worker contacts an in-state family's adoption worker, we really encourage just to like call that worker and to have a conversation, because we know that sometimes things can get complicated, and you have, especially the younger kids that are photolisted and they get a lot of inquiries. Sometimes we don't need to release a lot of information to those family workers. It really is just a conversation, and then the family worker can let us know, like, oh, no, this wouldn't be a good match, or oh, this might be a good match, and we'll move on to give you a little bit more information. At 30 days from any inquiry, the child's worker, through our website, that's password protected part for workers, they have to fill out a follow-up form for that inquiry to let us know, oh, this is a potential match or it's not a potential match. That doesn't always happen at 30 days. And if it doesn't, then we'll be contacting the worker to try to get that information complete. But it's a good way for our staff to know, because families, of course, like Brittany had said, families will be knocking at our door if they don't hear something about the inquiry. And so our families do that too. And then, if we know that it's not a potential match, we're able to share that information with the family or with the family's worker. You could go on to the next slide. So I talked about how when a child is photolisted, we have these stages of photolisting. And I know this is similar. We got this from Adopt Us Kids, but the difference between what we do is families can see these stages and they can still inquire about the youth. So open is, all youth are registered on this open status from the get-go. Within the first 21 days of receiving an inquiry, an adoption worker can use reviewing home study status. So I wanted to share the reviewing home study status. They can use this for 30 days. And the idea why we started using this is because there are some youth who get, we love this, but they get tons of inquiries and the adoption worker just becomes overwhelmed. And usually it's one worker, that's reviewing all of these home studies, and maybe their supervisor if their agency is set up that way. We were hoping that this reviewing home study status, if families saw this, and these words are on our website, so that my worker is busy reading and reviewing all the home studies sent recently. My forever family isn't within these. My worker will let you know by changing my status back to open. So we thought this would maybe slow down the inquiries, or, at least we're offering some communication to families so they know, okay, well, you might not hear for a couple of weeks, but it's not working the way that we thought it was. So we're doing, one of the things that we have this adoption oversight committee in Michigan, where agencies across Michigan, usually it's supervisors and directors, will come together every month and talk about adoption issues and some barriers that we're having and try to come up with solutions. So we're having a focus group on this reviewing home study status to see, do we still want to use it? So we get feedback from the state. So, but this is what we're doing now. And then if there is a family chosen and they're just sharing more information, they think it's going to be a potential placement, then we ask the worker to use this placement pending. And that this status says that I'm almost matched with my forever family. We are having meetings and visits, but if it doesn't work out, my worker will change the status back to open. And this is really helpful because we know we do so much work in recruiting families saying, oh, we have this, huge need for adoptive families. And then they inquire and they don't hear anything. So, families will say, what do you mean? Workers aren't even getting back to me. Or you are putting these kids on the internet, and when we inquire, they're probably, they're already matched with another family. And this placement pending is really helpful because it's communicating to the families where we are with recruiting the right family for the youth. And I don't remember who had said this, but for families who are not approved to adopt yet, we are always saying, we're hoping this child isn't even available by the time that you're approved to adopt. But one of the parts of our program that we have that's a little unique is we have 7 adoption navigators in Michigan that work for our program. So when families contact us and they, see Wednesday's Child feature or read about us or see our heart gallery and, they want more information, we assign an adoption navigator to them. If they want, they don't, it's not a mandatory part of our program, but so we'll have an adoption navigator that'll at least, reach out to the family and help them find an adoption agency in their area, attend, an orientation and help them through the training process, just help them navigate the systems, because we don't want to lose these families that we have worked so hard to recruit, by doing the heart gallery and doing the, the TV segments like the Wednesday's Child. And that has been really effective. And those navigators will work with the family until the family's matched with the child. And then one of the things that we added after the family and a child are matched is, well, we were matching kids with families and then those weren't working out. So one of the newest additions to our program is we do a match support program. So when youth are transitioning into a new family, doing the visits, and a lot of times, the youth are moving from a residential into a family, these social workers will work with the family on finding the right training that they need and just trying to, think ahead about any barriers or any problems that may arise when the child is actually moving into the home. So that's been really successful. So like I had said, with these stages of photolisting, workers don't have to utilize these, but they have been helpful, especially the placement pending. And we communicate with the workers. So when we are hearing that their, youth is visiting with a family, but they are placing the child on hold or removing from our photolisting, then we're keeping that communication open with the worker and trying to inform them like, oh, this will be really helpful if you do use this, but it ultimately is up to the adoption worker. So that is, I think that's my last slide. Yes, that is my last slide. So I'm open for, questions and answers, and hopefully that was helpful.
Thanks, Michelle. Great job. We are learning so much from both you and Brittany. For those of you who, I know I've seen a few folks asking about the handouts. They are in the chat, but we're also going to send them out. When we send out the survey, it'll be in that email. They'll be attached as well. So please don't fear. They will be coming one way or the other. But I did want to see if folks had questions for either Brittany or Michelle. I know, Alicia, I just saw one question in the chat that said, someone wanted to know, how do families take the news that they have not been selected as a potential match for a child? Michelle, Brittany?
Yeah, I think every family is different. Some families, are absolutely crushed, but especially families that are working with a navigator. Our navigators are all adoptive parents. So they've been through it. And if you're an adoptive parent, usually you don't adopt the first child you meet. So they're able to give that real life experience and, how you deal with it. But another thing that we do is really talk to families about how there are so many other kids out there. And, the first child you see, it may not be the right child for you, and you may not be the right family for them. But families that stick it out will find, will succeed in adopting through child welfare.
And for us, we get a lot of positive feedback. There's obviously a lot of parents that are sad and brokenhearted because, they see a picture and, like I think Lydia said earlier, they're like, I can see this child in my family, and you get very attached just from an initial picture. But, a lot of times we send out the email that they're not a match, and they just appreciate hearing from someone. Because a lot of times, you inquire and it just goes into a black hole. So sometimes getting a no is still better than getting nothing. So we've gotten a lot more positive feedback than anything when you send out that no email.
I love that, Brittany. Definitely following back up with families, even if it is a no, I agree. It's better than not being informed of the process or where they are in the process, or if they're still in.
Sorry, I just wanted to chime in as well. I know something that I've talked to multiple child welfare systems about is that the idea of having ideas and support for staff for how to have those conversations is so helpful. So again, so it isn't again that just sort of, well, if Alicia has a terrible style for having that conversation, but Michelle does it really well, that it's sort of a, you know, it's a guessing game as to whether families will have a better or a worse experience with that conversation. So I think making that an intentional piece of, are we talking with staff about, you know, not necessarily a script, but here are some key points to make, and here are ways to handle situations if families react this way, or if they have this frustration or this sadness, you know, and help them as staff know how to sort of work through that that grief and loss process that families may have if they really were attached and were excited about this. But it's also that opportunity again to keep building and supporting that relationship with families, so that they'll be able to see, okay, this might not be the child that will be in our family, but we still want to keep going through this, and we're willing to kind of do the hard emotional work. And that's another thing that has come up, and I don't remember where I heard this years ago, but I loved it, that someone said, you know, it's helpful, I think, for us to remind us as the adults doing this, that we, the adults, should be willing to take the bigger emotional risks and take on do the emotional work, because our kids who are waiting for adoption have done enough of that, and they shouldn't have to keep having that risk. So it may mean that we get our hearts broken a bit more in the process, but we're the ones who should carry that. We, the adults, as the prospective parents and as the workers. And I think that framing can be helpful. It might not be the most helpful thing to say to families right when you're telling them they're not a good match if they're going through that initial reaction. But I think that framing about, you know, we know this is hard, but let's keep this centered around the child or the youth, and the fact that we should be celebrating if there is another good match for that child.
One of the things that we are doing in our program is we have what we call waiting family forums, and it's part of our contract with the state, and we do these every quarter, and we invite families. Now with COVID, we're doing them virtually, which is great because families can come, you know, some families live 8 hours from our office. Well, the navigators will have these with families who are approved to adopt, and they are inquiring, but they aren't being matched with a youth yet. And so we have these waiting family forums because we don't want to lose these families. We don't want them to give up and get discouraged. So these waiting family forums, we do a little bit of a training piece. We do some, like, give them tips of what they can do while they're waiting. You know, sometimes they aren't chosen because they don't have enough trauma training. So we'll talk about, like, these are great trainings to get, you know, trauma, or read this book, or how to, you know, who to talk to in your school district. So you're all ready when you have a teenager coming into your home and you need to enroll them in school, like trying to get them prepared while they're waiting, because it could be over a year by the time they're matched with the youth. But we're finding that these waiting family forums are very helpful. And any of the stuff that I've talked about, if anyone wants to contact me, and I can connect you with that part of our program to kind of, if you think it might be helpful to implement that in your state. We want to share what's worked with us for sure.
I like that idea of waiting family forums. That is a really neat idea that I'm sure people will be interested in, Michelle. So go ahead, Alicia.
I was just saying, so Michelle and Brittany, you both talked about some of the specific timeframes that you have in place in terms of responding or moving things along at various steps in the process. And I know that's something that I get questions about all the time around the country, is what are different requirements in various states for those kind of timeframes. One question I often hear is, how did those timeframes get decided on? Who decides if it's, 2 business days or 1 week or 30 days? So, but then also the question of kind of the enforcement sounds too strong, but the enforcement or the encouragement to meet those, and what works to help support staff in being able to meet those. So that's me putting out a broad piece, but I'm wondering if you can each just talk a little bit more about any parts of that process that you want to, either how those specific timeframes got decided upon in your system, and how it's going, and maybe what's working to help people be successful in meeting those.
For our timeframes, I'm going to be very honest. We sat down, we had a meeting, and we were like, well, do you think this is too stringent? Do you think this is too much? And so we just kind of went around with our experience with casework and what we felt like could be done adequately at the time with caseloads, and just kind of went with it. And so far it's gone well. I think at the beginning when we started this in November 2019, I wouldn't say there was pushback from the regions or the caseworkers, but there was, oh my gosh, I can't get this done. You know, that's too short. I can't do it. And so as time went on, it's just the norm now. So now everything's getting done. So it's kind of just getting used to a new schedule. And there are times when we have to send out reminder emails, you know, it's been 30 days and they're like, oh, we've changed caseworkers 2 times, so it's not going to get done. You know, life happens. There's no repercussions. It's just, we would like to stick with it for the family. So there aren't any sort of negative things coming from us if they can't stick with it. But there are a lot of annoying emails from our office. So I think they like to get it done so they don't hear like, Brittany.
That's great. Thank you. Michelle?
With our, I guess it depends on the timeline. So with our, as last month, our adoption policy said that adoption workers had to register youth with us within 30 days. So that means telling us that a youth is matched with the family already, or that they need to be recruited through our program. And so we, you know, keep track with our data, and we're every month showing the state that this is not happening, or it's, you know, there's a lot of non-compliance. So through this adoption oversight committee that I mentioned that we meet every month with different agencies, people were saying that it's really hard for workers to get this done because within 30 days, they may have just like met the kid once and not have the case file from the state with them. So it was changed in policy to 60 days now, which makes a lot more sense because of how other things line up. So when things aren't working, when the timeframes aren't working, it can be changed. It takes a while, of course, but, you know, to kind of explain like these, I don't know where the 30 days ever started. I think it was before I've been in social work for a long time. I don't know where that came from, but it never made sense. And so now it's finally changed. When families inquire, and I'll tell you, there's not a lot of compliance with following up with families in the time that the adoption workers are supposed to choose a family. And that's also 30 days. I think that's probably not enough time, but I mean, some workers, you know, can make it happen in that, but a lot of times it just doesn't happen. And our policy says there's financial sanctions with agencies, but I don't know if that really happens. What we don't have a time frame for is when families are not chosen. Adoption workers in policy says that, you know, they're supposed to notify families, but it doesn't say when. So it could be a year down the road, they're sending out this, you know, blind copying everyone on an email saying, oh, your family wasn't chosen for this child. And that's not very helpful. So we just do we're involved in a lot of training of like all new adoption workers in the state. And I think it's really like trying to kind of pump workers up and like get them to really see how important it is to follow up with the families and to get them to, you know, the communication is so important that at least in Michigan, when you have something in policy and it's not followed, there's not a lot of things that are being done.
Thank you both for sharing that and for your honesty and transparency about it. I know it is, I think so many places around the country are looking for what are those magic numbers of the exact right number of days or weeks or months for those timeframes. And I think, you know, hearing both of you, I think it's such a good reminder that we have to sort of pick something and, you know, do it based on our best knowledge and then see how it works. And Michelle, as you said, then, you know,
adjust it.
Jumping up into it, this doesn't work, let's adjust it and be realistic. Yeah, that's great. Likia, I know we also had some questions and I think some comments early on in the chat of things people were wondering about or hoping to get out of this webinar, wanting to know specifically about how to photo list. And I'm wondering if you or I or both should say anything more about ways that people can find out more detail on that from Adopt US Kids. Do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. I can touch on that. I did see that in the chat, and of course, for those of you who've been sitting in this webinar, you know that we weren't going to do like a step-by-step on how to do the photo listing on our site or on our Adopt US Kids register. But there's 2 things I want to say about that. One is that we can definitely send links and connect you to presentations and resources and tools that we have on our site that really speak to that and can walk you through it. But for those of you who are interested in a more hands-on approach to supporting your state with doing photo listings or talking more about in-depth recruitment efforts, please, please, please feel free to email us. Alicia and I would love to connect with you and just begin some great work in figuring out how you could do things better and what you're doing well already. So just so you know, we can definitely support in that way as well. And I believe that email is in the chat. Thank you, Dallin.
Yeah, and we are at Adopt US Kids, we have, we and our colleagues across the project are available to provide more specific training, especially if you have staff who do photo listing who are maybe newer and haven't gotten trained on how to photo list children with Adopt US Kids. So if it's that kind of more technical training or the details of getting access to your account, if you're having trouble getting back into your photo listing account with Adopt US Kids, those kind of things, we also have support for that. So we can help on the kind of the technical as well as the broader practice piece and best practices for doing that. So we do encourage you to reach out. And as Leah said, you can contact us through the email that's in the chat, and we'll have contact information a few more slides from now as well.
Yes. Unless we have more questions, I think we're done with Q&A and we can move to the next slide.
Great. All right, so I'm gonna highlight a few more resources that we have and kind of wrap us up for today. So I know we were sharing in the chat some resources from Michigan and South Carolina. And again, for those of you, if you're having trouble downloading those, we will get those sent out along with the PowerPoint after this webinar. So you'll have those resources directly from our speakers. But we just wanted to highlight a few of the many things that we have on our website. And we should emphasize here, all of our Adopt US Kids resources and services are free to you because we're federally funded. We are a resource to the field. So we're not going to require anything else of you to get these resources. You can go to our website, download them, share them, use them however you wish. So we have a few resources highlighted here these are just a drop in the bucket of the many things we have on our website that we think will help you. We have several articles that highlight approaches for engaging children and youth, both in their exploration of permanency and adoption broadly, but also specifically for engaging with children and youth on developing their narratives or their profiles for photo listing or for other child-specific recruitment. So these articles that we have highlighted on the screen give some really good tips and key considerations and approaches for thinking about how to bring youth into the process in developmentally appropriate ways, and really think about how you can create helpful conversations with young people about exploring permanency, but also the bottom two articles listed there, engaging youth in writing their narratives and working with children and caregivers to create strength-based profiles. It gives some tips of how you can really bring those voices in, and with the children and caregivers, you can be hearing from their family, their foster parents or their relative caregivers, others who know the child, so that you can keep bringing in more of those strengths. I think that's always one of those key pieces, is figuring out how can we really bring in details about a child's personality and strengths and skills to help have there be a really strength-based profile that puts their best face forward, their best foot forward, especially for those public profiles where we need to not be including things that include more private and maybe medical details. So those are some great resources for you. Let's go to the next slide. We also have some other fantastic resources that may be relevant for you and we think provide great tips. We have last year's National Adoption Month webinar that continued the theme that we've had for several years now about engaging youth and youth voice. And that webinar was called Engage Youth, Listen and Learn. So great tips on how to include youth voice in recruitment efforts and permanency efforts, including in their own narratives, in their own recruitment efforts. So some things that are specific to the topic of this webinar, but also some things broader, but just as you work to find families for more children and youth who are waiting to be adopted, that has some great insights and tips from people in the field. And then a couple of tools that we think you'll probably find helpful, especially for those of you who are either you or supporting your staff in building their skills in doing photo listing and doing strength-based narratives. We have these tools. One is a quick reference photo listing guide. So it's a good way to really kind of have that on, a desk reference, whether virtual or printed out, for doing those photolisting steps, and a good kind of reminder of things that might get covered in lengthier webinars or in other trainings and other materials. And then our other tool, a checklist for reviewing children's photolisting narratives. So this is a good way to look at those kind of do's and don'ts that Lihia mentioned earlier, and thinking about what should be included, what shouldn't be included in narratives or profiles that are going to be used in various ways. Let's go to the next slide. So as I mentioned a moment or two ago, here's our contact information. There's the email address where you can reach out to us, and we can be in touch with you about ways we can support you in going deeper in the topics we covered in today's session. If you're interested in looking at your child-specific inquiry response system, or your photolisting practices overall, we're happy to help, as well as a broad range of other topics that we cover. And then we have the link there. It's on our website where you can sign up to keep getting our free newsletters and notifications about additional webinars that will come up. We'll have multiple webinars coming in the next year on great topics. So it's a great way to stay informed about what else we have available to us. I'm sorry, available to you. Can we go to the next slide? So with that, I want to thank you for joining us. I'm going to pass it back to Lihia in just a minute for a final thank you, but we want to thank you again for your time, for your engagement in the chat, and for your interest in this topic. Of course, we want to thank Michelle and Brittany for sharing such great information. As a reminder, you will get an email following this webinar with a link to that evaluation survey that Lihia mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. We really do value that evaluation input and feedback. We use that, we review the findings from that or the results. It helps us keep doing our work better, helps us plan for the future. So please do take just a few minutes and fill that out and let us know what's working well for you, how we can make things better, and any other feedback you have to share. Lihia, any closing words from you?
Just a big thank you to Brittany and Michelle for their great tools and tips, and for coming to share with everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks.